Welcome, ladies, to the very first segment of the 5 days to epic pleasure and passion training. I am so excited to have you here and for you to be joining me over these next 5 days. Or maybe you're like me and you find a new podcast or Netflix series that you want to binge and you listen to them all at one time. That's totally cool if you do that too. I have designed these trainings so that you can listen to them while you're driving to work one day or out walking or riding your bike, whatever works for you. So today I'm going to share with you the truth about intimacy. And on the agenda are two things. I'm going to share with you why traditional therapy modalities and typical Cosmo advice are never going to work to resolve intimacy issues. And I'm going to tell you what will. And then I'm going to go over, secondly, my 4-part success system for epic pleasure and passion, and why it has worked for hundreds of clients that I've been working with since 2017. First off, I want to share that you are in the right place. If you are a woman who's wondering where the spark and the passion in your relationship went and you want to get it back, you are in the right place. If you are wondering what happened to your libido, why is it that it seems that you never want to have sex? Why is it that it seems that it's really hard to get turned on and you just don't feel that much desire for intimacy? You are in the right place if you are questioning if maybe there's something wrong with you because you don't experience much pleasure or intimacy and you would love to have what other women seem to be having in their sex lives and relationships. You are in the right place if you're feeling emotionally disconnected and distant from your partner and you want to feel that passion and that spark and that emotional connection again. So if you are new here or you don't know much about me, I'm Tilly Storm. I've been a somatic sex and intimacy coach and host of the Multiorgasmic Millionaire podcast since 2017. That's a long time going in the podcast world. In 2022, I was actually voted one of the top 20 sex and intimacy coaches in the world by the esteemed Coach Foundation. And I've been supporting hundreds of women in their journey to experiencing epic sex, pleasure, and passion and connection for a while now with almost a 100% success rate. So before we dive into the content for today, I wanted to share with you who this training is not for. So I don't waste your time because I understand that I am not the right guide and mentor for everyone. So I'm going to shoot it to you straight. I'm just that kind of person. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I know you're busy, so I'm going to go ahead and share that this training is not for you if the word holistic or energy completely turns you off and it isn't your jam. It's not for you if you're really invested in the Western medical system and traditional talk therapy and you are not open to any alternative ways of looking at things that don't fit the Western medical system and traditional talk therapy model. This is not for you if you're easily offended by me saying the word sex or orgasm or pleasure, anything like that. If that really turns you off, then you're probably not going to enjoy listening to this training. It is not for you if you have a hard time with men, if you blame, shame your partner, if you hate men, if you think that they are the reason for all of your problems, and you are not willing to take responsibility for yourself and for where you are at in your intimacy, your sex life, and your relationship. Now, if you are still here after I've gone through that list, then it's very likely you pass a test and you're going to want to commit to listening to each of these trainings because inside of this training, I'm going to be taking you well beyond what you would ever learn from a traditional couples or marriage counselor or even a sex therapist, and well beyond what you would ever experience by just Googling tips, tricks, or techniques on how to increase your libido, how to experience more pleasure in the bedroom, how to get the emotional connection back, how to get the passion and the spark back in your relationship. Okay, so if you have read all of the books, if you have Googled all of the things, if you have listened to some podcasts before, trust me, you're going to get actual practices in this training that I am going to be giving you that I give to my private clients because I want you to start experiencing the difference between the actual practice and taking the action and just trying to learn more things. So let's dive into agenda item number 1. Did you know that marriage and couples counseling and therapy has the lowest success rate of any therapy modality in existence, and that it often makes your relationship worse than before you went? And did you know that the average couple waits 7 years too long to do anything about their relationship dissatisfaction? The sad reality is that time does not fix issues in your sex life and your relationship. Research has shown with great accuracy that time in an unhappy sex life or relationship only predicts greater and greater unhappiness. So for those of you who have gone the route of traditional counseling or therapy, it's likely that maybe it didn't work for you at least to the degree that you would like it. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here still seeking support around this, yeah? Or maybe you did get some good stuff from it, but you're looking to dive deeper. So why doesn't traditional therapy, like couples or marriage counseling or therapy, why doesn't it work or go deep enough for some people? Well, one simple answer is because you can't solve a problem on the level of mind the problem was created. All issues that you might be experiencing pertaining to intimacy, including your experience of pleasure or orgasm, your ability to experience desire for sex, your ability to communicate openly and vulnerably with your partner about intimacy or sex or anything that feels vulnerable, your ability to emotionally connect with your partner, you're feeling passionate and connected to your partner, all of these things. Any issues that you may experience in this arena, the source of the problem or the root can always be traced to an event or a series of events over time that occurred or imprinted your limbic system or your unconscious brain, rendering your cortical thinking brain to have very little to do with your perceived issue. So to break that down, what does that mean? You can't talk your problems out. The problem is that all marriage counselors and therapists who use traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, they only work by talking things out. They're working at the cortical thinking mind, the level of the mind that had nothing to do with how the problem was created in the first place. This means that simply talking about your problems in the past isn't going to solve the issue. It might make it a little bit better, but it's like putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound that is bleeding out. The only way that you can solve these issues is when you go deep enough to the level of the mind that these issues were created on, which is your limbic brain and your unconscious mind. This is why sex therapy, marriage counseling, couples therapy, even just traditional therapy for yourself, it doesn't work because you didn't get to the root of the issue. You're trying to solve a limbic system issue or an unconscious block by talking about it, which doesn't even make any sense. So maybe you dragged your husband to therapy, you tried to talk it out, but it either didn't fix anything or it made it even worse. Or you likely just waited too long to seek support and now you don't know what kind of support you need, causing you to feel less and less satisfied as the days, months, and years pass on. And now you're feeling a bit unhopeful and unsure that you're ever going to be able to have an amazing sex life and relationship with your partner again. Now that you're clear why traditional counseling and therapy don't work, let's talk about the typical Cosmo advice or Googling intimacy tips, tricks, and techniques, or going to the sex toy store to try and spice things up, or maybe even just wearing sexy lingerie or trying a new position. Let's talk about why this also isn't going to work to solve your intimacy issues. Well, it's likely that you've probably already tried some of those things, and maybe at your core, you still don't feel confident in the bedroom. Maybe at your core, you still don't feel emotionally connected to your partner again. The short answer is that it's not about how you resolve the problem. It's about who you're choosing to be. So, I grew up in a very religious environment and a very conservative area in the South. And one of the things that I really noticed when I was growing up was that my parents never talked to me about pleasure. They never talked to me about sex. I actually got a textbook on women's bodies, and I learned how the menstrual cycle worked through a textbook. So luckily, when I did have my period, I actually knew what it was because no one ever talked to me about it. And one thing that I started to recognize is that my parents would always shame me, even when I was little, for walking out of my bedroom naked. I remember one day walking out of the bathroom without a towel on, and I was just walking to my room, and they fussed at me for being naked and not getting dressed before I walked to the bathroom. That really imprinted me. So by the time I was 27 years old, my partner at the time made a comment of, "Oh, Telly, you can only orgasm in this one way. Like, I wonder what that's about. Like, maybe if you kind of explored some things, maybe if we tried some new things, you would be able to have and experience pleasure more easily." And I started thinking, the wheels started turning in my head. And I realized at that time that I felt really uncomfortable in my body, even though I fit the conventional beauty standards of the time of being tall and thin. I didn't feel comfortable. I hated my saggy boobs. I had just had 2 kids and just finished breastfeeding, and my boobs were saggy, and I didn't want to have sex without a shirt on or the lights out. And I remember that when my partner pointed that out, that I started to feel very limited in my experience of pleasure. And it wasn't until I dove in and did the work that I'm going to be sharing with you now that I began to change who I was as a sexual woman and a woman in relationship. As someone who wasn't very expressive in my sexuality, who didn't feel comfortable in my sexuality, and who definitely teetered on being vulnerable emotionally and sharing my truth and what I actually thought and felt in the moment to moment with my partner, that was not something I did or was used to. And it wasn't until I started being my empowered version of who I was as a sexual woman and who I was in relationship that things started to change. When we shift our identity about what's possible, this makes the how so much easier. Examples of who you are likely being right now until you really dive in and do the work that I'm going to share with you today are: number one, an outdated version of yourself, like your inner child or your teenage self with her beliefs about relationships, vulnerability, pleasure, sex, intimacy. Maybe, number two, you're showing up unconsciously as your mom's version of relationships, pleasure, and intimacy because you never questioned your conditioning. Or number three, maybe you're currently showing up in your sex life and relationships as any other disempowering identity that you developed when you were younger that no longer matches the reality that you want to be experiencing now. This is why the how you have the epic pleasure, how you ignite the passion and the spark again, it isn't going to help if you don't have the who sorted. This is why tips, tricks, techniques, trying a new sex position, simply wearing lingerie, even if you don't feel sexy in it, or trying to spice things up by going to the sex toy store and trying something new. This is why trying to be emotionally vulnerable when you don't really feel safe to be. These things don't work to resolve the problem because you haven't stepped into the who yet. Let me break it down into 4 simple steps so your brain starts to have a little ease around, but Tilly, I want to know how. My 4-part success system for epic pleasure and wild passion is this. Number 1, embodiment and nervous system work. Number 2, inner work and mindset around shifting your story and identity that you've created about pleasure and intimacy. Number 3, getting a proper pleasure and intimacy and relationship education. And number 4, getting the right type of support and accountability that gets to the root of the issue, which always lies in the unconscious mind and the limbic system, which is why traditional therapy doesn't work. Okay, so my entire goal for this series is to give you what does not work so that you quit wasting your time, money, and energy so that you can do what actually does work. So in these 5 days, you're going to know exactly what it's going to take if you want to experience epic pleasure and passion and how you can get there too. Now, I want to share with you a story about what is actually possible when you go through this proven method, this proven system to get results. So I'm going to share with you about one of my clients, Soch. Soch was at the end of her rope when we first talked. She was working in a busy hospital during COVID as an L&D nurse, labor and delivery, caring for a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and she had no desire or pleasure in her sex life at all. Like, no libido, didn't want to have sex. Even when she did, she didn't experience any pleasure or have an orgasm. She was completely numb and feeling disconnected. Her and her husband explored several different types of therapy. They'd even done somatic therapy. They'd done sex therapy. They did cognitive behavioral therapy and several personal development workshops at a resort, but none of them worked. After all, he was actually a marriage and family therapist, so he knew what to look for. He was taking on a lot of responsibility to fix things in their sex life, and after being completely at a loss, he finally told her that she needed to do something for herself. And after hearing about my podcast, The Multiorgasmic Millionaire, from a friend, Soch reached out, she booked the pleasure assessment call, and she decided to work with me. What happened next is the reason that I am so passionate about helping women transform their intimate lives. Soch went from feeling like a zombie to feeling alive and vibrant again. She experienced a 180 around her lack of desire, wanting more sex and connection than ever after 14 years of marriage and 2 kids. She figured out what she wanted and liked sexually and how to ask for it, whereas before, she didn't even know who she was as a sexual woman. She resolved her social anxiety. She explored things in her sex life with her husband that she never previously would have even considered. I still remember the tears that came to my eyes when I witnessed their happiness on a client interview I did with the both of them on my podcast. Now, if you want to experience a metamorphosis like this in your own sex life and relationship, then I want to share with you about the Multiorgasmic Bliss group coaching program that is starting again January 28th or 29th, somewhere around there. It's the last week of January. The last date to sign up for the program is January 26th on Friday. And this program is designed to help you take you through the exact steps that I've just shared with you, the methodology that I have shared with you today, and that Soch went through herself to achieve the results that she got working with me. And it's not just her. There are literally hundreds of women that I have taken through this same proven methodology to ensure that they get the results that they came to me for. So if you're interested in learning how you can actually receive the support, accountability, and guidance to get these results, then I really want to encourage you to fill out the application at the link in the show notes. First, you're going to book a call with me, and then you're going to answer a couple of questions. That way I know before we get on a call if you're actually someone I think that I can help and who might be a fit for the program. On the call, we're going to go over 4 things. We're going to talk about what you are struggling with in your relationship and sex life. I'm going to take a full diagnosis and history of what has been going on. And then we're going to move, secondly, into what your goals and desires are. We're going to get really clear about what you want to get if you were to sign up to work with me. What are the actual results that you want to achieve? And then thirdly, we're going to talk about the blocks and obstacles in the way and how exactly you can overcome them. And the 4th thing that we're going to do on this quick application call is to talk about and answer your questions about the Multiorgasmic Bliss group coaching program. Or if I find that you are someone who's better fit for private coaching, we can talk about the details of that as well. All you have to do is fill out the application, book the call at the link in the show notes, and then I'll see you there. But make sure you get your call in by January 26th if you're interested in joining us for this round of the Multiorgasmic Bliss group coaching program. So in the next training, I'm going to share with you all about the first ingredient to my 4-part success system and why working at the unconscious nervous system level is crucial to you experiencing the pleasure and passion you desire in your relationship. And if you don't know what any of those words mean, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything to you. So stay tuned. See you on the next training, Hot Mama.